Hi, I'm Pete Orthman from Mad Cow News, and this is a review of the news for November 2014. Certainly seems that November kind of put a little ding in the shiny armor of Mr. Larry Leak. He had two major setbacks, and we'll be talking about those. Also, days of old almost revisited. The commissioners tried to have a kind of sneaky meeting, but it didn't work. And to their credit, some of the commissioners listened to the people. I believe that's the first time possibly in 20 years that that's happened. We'll talk about that. And finally, I have some new information about what our jail should have cost and what we should have gotten in exchange for the money. And there's no question that we need to get some answers from Mr. Leak, Mr. Ledford, and Mr. Tolley. Let's talk about these things. As we all know, the election was held in the beginning of November. And Pat Franklin, by all accounts, should have been the top vote getter. Why? Because she and Mr. Leak are very good friends. And Leak candidates never, ever lose. It's that way that Mr. Leak helps these people get to be elected and then guides them in the appointment of positions such as Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, or the other boards that sometimes need a little nudge, and they do favors back for him. It's a very neat little process, and it's very possible that Mr. Leak thinks that that's a completely appropriate way to do business. Of course it is not. So when Ms. Franklin didn't win, it was stunning, because finally the people of Madison County are starting to recognize exactly how insidious the Leak machine has been. So Ms. Franklin didn't lose maybe even on her own merits, but because she was associated with Larry Leak. Interesting. That's never happened, and just 2 years ago, people would have bet anything that it never would have happened. But we're making progress. We're starting to see real democracy in the county, as opposed to the good old boy network, just electing and re-electing the same old people. But also, Mr. Leak had an honest day in court. As we know, Mr. Lunsford had his day in court. Mr. Lunsford was tried for murder because he drove his car at 138 miles an hour and T-boned another car, killing the occupant. Mr. Leak tried very, very hard to have an awful lot of evidence suppressed in this case, and the judge wasn't allowing it. Everything was on the table. And usually Mr. Leak has one or two friends that get on the jury. Didn't happen this time. So this time there was an honest judge, a capable and competent jury, who heard the information and came back with a decision: guilty. Now, some people have asked why wasn't Mr. Lunsford found guilty of murder in the second degree. And the answer seems to be that there was no malice involved in the matter. That Mr. Lunsford didn't go and get in his car and say, I am going to kill this particular person or even any person this evening with my car. Had it been, he would have been found guilty of that, I have no question. They also wanted to know why it wasn't murder in the first degree. And the answer to that is because they couldn't prove that he had been drinking. Had they proved that he was intoxicated at the time, it would have been murder in the first degree. But Mr. Lunsford was sentenced to the maximum amount of time. He was given 19 to 32 months. And some people have said, oh, he'll be out in 6 months, whatever. No, the minimum he has to serve, as I understand it, is 19 months. Hardly a fair exchange for a person's life, but it could have been probation. So Mr. Lunsford got a fair trial with an honest judge, good jurors, and a fair decision. A good day all around. Not like Mr. Leak to lose, but he did. The monthly meeting of the commissioners was postponed due to Veterans Day, and so it was held later in the month. And the only point of particular interest was Mrs. Vilsinskis's adamant demand that she be part of the discussions on the new proposed shooting range. Something was up with that. I don't know exactly what it was, but something was up. Normally, people would have just faded off into the sunset, their term expired, and be done with it. But she insisted that it would be done on her watch. And so the commissioners then had a hurry-up meeting, and they announced it only to those of us who are on the list. And by the way, anybody who would like to be notified of any commissioner meeting, you simply contact Darlene Reinhardt and tell her that you wish to be put on the list, and you too will get a notification at least 2 days in advance of any meeting, a regular meeting, or in this case, a special meeting. They also put this meeting at the Extension Service office, and they had it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when the fewest people possible could have arranged to be there. But indeed, people were there. WLOS was there. Somebody had obviously called them. Additionally, people who live up and down Little Pine, who would be immediately affected, were there. It was an instant time where they rallied the forces and brought them all to bear on the matter. And credit especially goes to Jim Baker once again, because he heard the people complain that they could already hear gunshots and didn't know that it was coming from a shooting range. But they certainly didn't want more. It was troublesome as it was, but they just figured it was a neighbor shooting and make the accommodations. But Commissioner Baker heard the people say that they didn't want to have their lives interrupted with a shooting range, and so he became opposed to the idea of it being located right there. Donnie Laws, the county attorney, gave an eloquent discussion about a 100-year lease and how he'd never heard of such a thing. And as they looked at it, the financing of this was bizarre at best. Now, the county's worked very hard to bring this shooting range to be, and I have mixed feelings about it, as do most people. It would be, indeed, a great financial boon for Madison County, but at what cost to the people who live around such a thing? They're talking about 4 or 5 or 6 different ranges: a handgun range, a long gun range, a shotgun range, some tactical ranges, law enforcement and civilians. So there'd sound like a war zone when this thing is in full operation. How much is that worth? Yes, it'll bring in a ton of money to Madison County. It'll bring people into Madison County who will look around and see what a lovely place this is, and they might run the river or ride the horses or do any of the things that Madison County is just so good at. But at what cost to the neighbors? So they should have tabled it, but instead they sent the ball back to MOTAC for further discussion. What I also got from that meeting was that we don't even know who Motac is. We don't know how much money they have, who they're backed by, who their sponsors are. We don't have that information. We just know that somebody is making a great sounding proposal until you look at the fine print. But the commissioners did ultimately hear what the people were saying, and it looks like, at least for the moment, that idea is dead in the water. Finally, I was in contact this month with Faye Harvey, who is the financial director in Pickens County, Georgia. That's important because the original jail, like ours, was built in Pickens County, Georgia. Ours is basically a duplicate of that. The second architectural firm said that they already designed a jail. There's no point in reinventing the wheel if it were, and rather they would just use that design here. It would save us a ton of money. They started their jail in the year 2007 when everything was booming. The economy was just blistered. And so everything would be particularly expensive because all contractors were busy. And the reason that I called them was to find out how much they paid to have their jail built as opposed to what we paid to have our jail built. It should be noted that their jail has the full complement of 135 beds. If you'll recall, we have half of that because Sheriff at the time, John Ledford, said that we could get by with 65 beds. It would be okay. So we have this huge facility, the same size facility, with half the beds. For that, we paid over $10 million, very close to $11,500,000. So it was curious to me to find out how much Pickens County, Georgia, in 2007 paid for their jail. I have the letter here. The Pickens County Adult Detention Center and Sheriff's Office facility was a design/build with a maximum cost of $7,948,360. The county paid a total of $7,927,548. Some invoices were paid to facility design/builders. Others were paid to the facility group. There were no separate architectural fees. The total cost of our jail, when it was built in Pickens County, $7,950,000 for all the beds. We have 65 beds, and we paid $11,500,000. Mr. Leak, Mr. Ledford, Mr. Tolley, you owe the people in Madison County an explanation for this. We paid 50% more than Pickens County, Georgia, and we have half the beds. I want to know what's going on. I know the first $1 million vanished. I know we overpaid H&M by about $500,000 and never collected $190,000 because they were late. I know that Mr. Leak gifted about $400,000 to Cope Associates from Knoxville, Tennessee, the architect. We need some explanations. Why did we pay 50% more than Pickens County, Georgia, and we got less in the process when it should have all been cheaper? There's going to be some accounting. I'm not letting this go. And more the people of Madison County are starting to understand that I'm onto something, that they have been taken advantage of. And the day of reckoning is coming. So that's it. That's the news recapped for November 2014. And it is our plan to do weekly bites of news. I'm planning to attend the bigger meetings each month, school board, the commissioners, any other boards that are going on, and probably Marshall. It is kind of curious why all of a sudden Marshall thinks that it needs to pay 3 times more for a police department than it did 5 years ago. We're going to look into those numbers. It's another version of Mr. Leak's magic and how Mr. Leak gets these interesting things assigned. I'm also going to bring you more information on John Ledford. Who is this guy? What has he done? There's more going on that we have found that isn't very complimentary. So you want to stick around for that. I hope you'll come back and visit, and I hope you'll tell your friends to come join Mad Cow News, see what's going on. And we're always looking for your input, any ideas, suggestions, or if you want to join us in a discussion or a conversation, please get in touch with us. Editor@madcownews.com.